Whilst we don't usually associate low cost with Apple, they certainly did make LCE computers. Hello all and welcome back to the corner. In today's video I want to take a look at my LCIII that has been stuck in the corner of my mind for a while. And yes, it's another Apple thing, I'm sorry. I swear I'm not obsessed. Honest. But it is Macintosh, a month where creators including myself create content focused on Apple's earlier computers, ranging from the original Macintosh to the late Power Mac computers of the early 2000s.
I have to get a replacement battery to put in there. But let's see if we can't figure out maybe what this machine did in its past life.
Plus I wanted to make at least one video that ties into it this month. One that fits the theme anyway. Oh, and a hearty welcome to any of you who may be new to the channel. Now then. This example of an LCIII is dirty, faded, and even comes with bonus rubber goo that's come from the monitor stand. Nothing that's hard to clean, but it's something that certainly needs doing for sure. I have it here with this Apple high resolution monitor which came with this Mac. You can actually see how the case fading lines up perfectly with the monitor stand. Now, I'm expecting that you'll expect me to expect you to think that this is yet again another broken machine. And actually, you'd be wrong to think that I think that you think that. Yeah. Actually, it's another rare item in NRC history which actually works to start with. Even the original Apple SCSI hard drive is still working and contains a working copy of macOS 7.6 and also someone else's data. Also neat is that it still has a working copy of Microsoft Word for macOS on here. Thankfully otherwise it just appears to contain some readmes of how to use a computer and nothing real naughty. I have it hooked up to this Apple design keyboard and keyboard fanatics will feel nauseous from this squishy rubber dome mess that feels more akin to typing on Play-Doh. Oh, and apparently some keys on this don't work. Nice. Oh well, thankfully I also have this more error correct Apple keyboard with some very nice mechanical keys by Alps instead. Why do all my keyboards have faulty keys? Yes, I'm really failing with ease today. Sorry. Now I've shown that it's working, it's best I power it down before I start feeling the impulse to write some fictional drama involving demons again. On the back of the LCIII, we'll see from left to right is the power switch, AC inlet, the monitor port for Apple or compatible monitors, a serial port for the printer, a serial port for the modem, an external 25-pin DB style SCSI port for hard disks, CD-ROM drives, scanners and whatever else you may have. And ADB, 1, 2, 3. ADB, 1, 2, 3. ADB, baby, you and me now. Alrighty then. And of course 3.5mm output and input for speakers and microphones. Oh, in typical Apple fashion, it doesn't fit a standard jack. Moving along to the top case, and I'm very carefully lifting these tabs as I've seen these to become very fragile and break. Inside we have a beautiful example of system design where all the internals have been laid out very nicely with minimal restriction in airflow. Going clockwise we have the PSU at the top, Apple SuperDrive floppy disk drive with high density floppy support, SCSI 3.5-inch hard drive, and the LCIII motherboard. Another neat trick which Apple computers tended to have was the toolless removal of parts, and as you can see, it's all just snapped into place, including the fan and speaker. On the motherboard we have the RAM slots, floppy and power in ports, integrated 4MB of system RAM, a SCSI port with hard drive power output, PRAM battery which thankfully was removed before I got it, 4MB ROM for the Macintosh toolbox, an LC expansion port which could be used with the Apple IIe card for backwards compatibility or for networking, a crystal audio chip, a CPU at 25MHz, optional space for an upgrade chip, a microcontroller for the ADB port, AMD SCSI controller, the VLSI ASIC containing most of the graphics unit, memory controller, UARTs and system logic, RS422 drivers, and finally the video RAM DAC. So, you might be asking, why am I taking this unit entirely apart when it works? Well, because this unit needs some service work in the sense of a full recap of the motherboard. But I thought you said before that you shouldn't do a recap if it's not needed. Well, that's true, but as is typical of Macs around this era, and well, some other computers of this time period, the onboard SMD capacitors are leaking, as you can see. Even if my unit currently works, if I don't sort this, it soon won't, from either the capacitors not working enough for the system to run, or from the electrolytic fluid eating the traces and components and causing serious board level failures. So a recap really is needed in this case. Also, because the recap is going to involve hot air and the cleanup is going to need some liquid based cleaners such as IPA, I'm going to be removing this manufacturing label, although I will be putting it back on after the job. I'm using the edge of a razor blade here to mainly lift and cut the glue underneath the label. The angle is more like this in this graphic, where the edge both lifts the label and separates the glue, though I am careful to go slow in case the blade gets stuck or catches on the label. On the workbench now, the first thing to do is to add some Kapton tape to the plastic parts to protect them from the hot air. Kapton tape is some type of miracle product. It seems like it should just melt when blasted with hot air and or allow the heat to damage the plastic beneath it, but yet it just doesn't. I can therefore only assume that in fact it is made of magic. I decided to start on these audio capacitors for no real reason other than that they were the closest. I'm using a fine pitch nozzle on the airgun which is set for a maximum of 400C. Now, that will sound like a heck of a lot, and it is, but the idea is to heat the solder quickly enough and not let the board soak in all the heat and thus minimise the chances of damage to the pad or the inner layers. I have been trying this technique out on other non-important boards of mine, and in all fairness it does seem to work, but you must keep it moving and not keep the heat all in just one area. With the caps removed, I then use 99% IPA to clean the PCB of electrolyte underneath the capacitors. This is the best and probably the only time that we can do this, so best make a good job of it. After cleaning, I use the solder wick to remove old solder, and then again I clean up any flux residue from the wick. After that I solder in the new capacitors. I'm using a mix of Nichicon and Panasonic capacitors here. If you're not ambidextrous, you will learn to be. You will learn. That was not fun. Seriously not fun. At this point, some of you may be asking about the PSU and whether or not to recap it, as I do know that they can go bad. And I almost did consider doing it, but as I don't have the capacitor values at hand, and also as the PSU is still working with no visible signs of failure, I thought it was best to leave it alone for now. I had similar views with the Apple SCSI drive as well. This will fail for certain in future, but it currently works okay. I do have a SCSI converter in the form of an STM32 based Blue Pill SCSI emulator, but I don't currently have the resistors to finish the board, and neither do I have a working or bootable image for it. So whilst I may come back to this idea, I'm going to stick with the original parts for both. With the caps all replaced, it's time for the most important step, cleaning all that electrolyte off the PCB. Now people have various methods for doing this, including using a dishwasher. However, as I do not have a dishwasher, I'm just going to be using liberal amounts of IPA and then using a toothbrush to gently agitate the electrolyte from the board. Afterwards I use some water to clean the electrolyte fully, and then again I apply a liberal amount of IPA to wash off the water so I do not promote any corrosion on the PCB. After which I left it to dry for several hours whilst vertical, just to let any liquid that was on the board drain off. Whilst the motherboard dries, I'm going to clean the case with window cleaner, IPA and a toothbrush. Normally I like to wash plastic cases with soapy water in either under the sink or the bath, but because the LCIII has the RF shield plastic welded to the case, I don't want to trap water and again promote any corrosion. So whilst it's not quite as effective, this should still give a much needed clean to the case. Getting rid of the rubber goo is my first target, and for the first part I was able to use some cotton buds with IPA to remove it. The second one was a big clump of glue that had become wedged into the grill lines of the case, so I used a plastic scraper to remove most of it and then clean the rest off with IPA. Remember, always use a softer tool than your case, that way if there's a fight between the two, your case won't be the one damaged. There's some circular marking on top of the case that I tried multiple methods with. First I tried window cleaner. Then I tried IPA, then baking soda with water, which can really get into deep areas, and then finally the same plastic scraper I showed before, but whatever it is, it just wouldn't budge, and not wanting to damage the case, I just left it alone. For the rest of the case I used window cleaner and a toothbrush just to get into the grill vents and the pores of the surface, just enough to clean the case up. Other than a few paint specks which the scraper easily removed. With the case now cleaned up and the motherboard now dry, the LCIII can finally go back together. And just to check I haven't killed it during the recap, perfect. Sure, the case could do with retrowriting, seeing it's still too cold outside to do that and I don't have a proper indoor setup. This is where I'll leave it for now. And to be honest, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm just glad to have prevented a greater disaster from happening with all the leaking capacitors. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like what you saw, you might find these videos to your interest as well. Also, I did stick the label back on. I didn't forget. Honest.